Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, you know, my new biographical information no longer is about all the stuff I did. I go places now and they just say, ladies and gentlemen, Sarah's dad. And that's fine with me. I'm loving it. By the way, I'm so glad to be here because I almost didn't make it. Got here, thought I was going to be late, and couldn't find a parking place. Alec Baldwin had my parking place, and I did not want to ask him to move. I knew that did not end well. By the way, people ask me about Sarah all the time, and they say, where did Sarah get so tough? Now, sometimes I'll say, have you ever met her mother? But I don't do that when her mother is around. Now, the truth is she had two very mean older brothers. And they made that girl tough. They super glued her fingers together when she was little. That was a trip to the emergency room. Gave her a big glass of mud and told her it was a chocolate milkshake. And if Jim Acosta thinks that he made her tough, he has no idea. But the truth is, she learned to fight for what she believes in and what she stands for. And I'm so proud of her. And I have people all the time who express that, and believe me, as a dad, it means the world to me. But I want to be fair. Donald Trump was not my first choice for president. I was my first choice for president, just so you know. But I'm so grateful to live in a country, and grateful for those we have elected who have the courage to stand for the things that matter to us. Now, I'm not here today to tell you how to vote, because God will do a better job of that than I ever could. And I might even lead you astray. He won't. I wish you would vote like me. And I'd be happy to tell you how to do that if you'd like, but I just want you to make sure that you don't lose your privilege of casting a ballot. You know, where I come from down in South Arkansas, we used to say that if you didn't get the cemetery vote, you couldn't win. One of the reasons I believe in the resurrection is because election day, we'd see dead people go vote every year. But the only thing worse than having dead people regularly vote is we have living people who fail to vote. There's something wrong when we just say it doesn't matter. You see, it does matter. And for those who say, well, what does this have to do with me being a Christian? Let me quote Jesus to you. He's a pretty good source. He was once posed the question about paying taxes, which was basically a question of whether or not he should participate in the civil government. And it was a trick question, because if he had said, oh yeah, pay your taxes, they would have said, he's loyal to the Roman government. He's really not a spiritual leader. And if he said, don't pay your taxes to the Roman government, then the Romans would immediately arrest him for insurrection, and his crucifixion would have come much sooner. So he answered with a question. He said, whose image is on the coin? And they said, well, it's Caesar's. And he said, then render to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, but render to God what belongs to God. You see, he understood something that a lot of believers in America don't seem to understand. You don't give up one of your duties and responsibilities as a citizen of heaven in order to be a citizen on earth. God expects for you to participate, obviously, in the kingdom. You're going to live there forever. You're going to be preparing your life for that life. But you're not excused from this one. If you were, the moment you trusted Christ, pop, off you would go to heaven. Why has he left us here? Because he left us here to be the salt and the light. That's what he said we were. He said, you were the salt of the earth. When he was talking to the disciples, and he was looking at the Sea of Galilee as fishermen were bringing the fish right up out of the water. And as they were doing that, those fish started spoiling immediately. I often said those fish are just like Baptists. The moment they come out of the water, they start spoiling. The Pentecostals love that. The Baptists really are the ones that are looking around with a sour look on their face right now. Jesus never, ever expected that righteousness would come from the civil government. He never expected that the culture would be mostly influenced by the politicians. Today, I don't believe God is looking at New York, Hollywood, or Washington as the centerpiece for the awakening and the revival that we desperately need in this country. I think he's looking at Christians and the churches, and he's saying, they're not the salt, you are. Be the salt. But how can you be the salt if you don't even vote, if you don't pray, if you don't stand? And the truth is, you can't be. And that's why between now and Tuesday, it's important that you pray, that you vote, and that you keep standing. By the way, I've already voted early. That way, even if I die, I'm still voting. The dead man is voting on Tuesday. We've got to recognize that there are things that could change in this country if we were the salt. And I want to make it very clear, I'm not here today to pitch one party over another. I'm not even here to pitch one candidate over another. I have my preferences, my convictions, my choices, and I'm adamant about it. I take a stand and I support candidates financially with my vote and with my voice. But what I want to say to you is this. There's some things I care about, and the reason I pick certain candidates is because they care about things I care about. None of them are perfect. Not one person running for public office is absolutely perfect and is right about everything. So if you're looking for the perfect candidate, you won't find him. And if you think there is one, then put your name on the ballot, because obviously you must think you're the only one left. But until you do, pick the one closest to the ones who truly exemplify the biblical values that matter. You see, I want to eliminate poverty in this country. I don't think anybody in the United States of America ought to continue living in poverty, but the best way out of poverty is not to get them enslaved to government. It's to get them a job so that they can work and earn and do for their families. I don't want one single little boy, little girl ever to be beaten by his mother or father. I detest the thought that some wife would be battered by a husband. I don't ever want to see that. And it's not about who we elect, but it's about one day having people who believe that the family is the most protected place that a child ought to grow up in, and believing that marriage and a husband and a wife raising their children in a loving atmosphere is what brings godly nations to the forefront. And I want to elect candidates who recognize that the power of a family where fathers still live in the household, it means something. I want them to bring about a government that doesn't encourage people to get divorces, but encourages people to stay together in their marriages. I want a government that helps people to recognize that addiction will destroy their very lives. And rather than just punish them for the addiction, will give them a pathway out of it, and will not keep the churches from being able to speak to them in prisons and in jail cells because they're afraid they might hear the gospel. I want them to hear the gospel because it's the only thing that will save them. I want a government who, when they appoint judges or when they vote for policies, they vote in such a way And they appoint judges in such a way that they respect what was quoted here at this very spot a few moments ago from the Declaration of Independence. That we hold these truths to be self-evident, meaning they're so obvious we shouldn't even have to say them. But for emphasis, we will. All men are created equal, endowed by their Creator, not their government, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those are not gifts from the government. Those are not things that the government votes to let you have. Those are things that God wants you to have, has given to you, and demands that you protect them. And you vote to make sure that you never let this government get in the hands of people who do not believe that there is a God who gave us our basic fundamental rights. And we never should elect people who do not respect the fact that every life from the moment of conception is a human life. And from conception forward, it is deserving of our respect and our protection. You see, I don't think there is such a thing as a life that's expendable, disposable, that lacks inherent worth and value. I don't believe there's such a thing as a life that is less valuable than another, any more than I believe that there's a life that's worth more. A person isn't worth more because he's white. He's not worth less because he's black or brown. A person is not worth less because that person is a female. A person is not worth less because he's poor, or because his father didn't have a last name that opened doors for him. I'm a living example of somebody who has benefited from a country in which all of us are considered equal. Not the same, just equal. I know where I came from a family dirt poor, a mother who lived in a house with dirt floors, literal dirt floors. No floor, no electricity, no running water. First male in my entire family lineage to ever graduate high school, much less go to college. I stand here today as a product of a country that said that I was worth as much as the richest kid in my hometown. And I'm telling you that the child with Down syndrome is as valuable to Almighty God as the captain of the football team. Don't ever let anyone tell us differently. Now, what we have to do is protect and preserve this great republic, and part of it is praying, voting, and standing. Father took his little girl to Yad Vashem in Jerusalem a few years ago. He wanted her to understand the Holocaust, and he wanted her to understand why 11 million people were murdered, 6 million of them simply because they were Jews. And how that happened because a lot of people in the church just looked the other way, as we saw on the screen when the video of Bonhoeffer was played. And he took his little girl there. She was 11 years old. And he was a little concerned that it might be a bit traumatic for her, but he wanted her to have in her soul an understanding of why people must stand up, speak up, and stop evil. And he took her through Yad Vashem, and she saw what happened as the Third Reich took power and as the Nazis began to systematically murder Jews. They were made to wear the Star of David on their clothing, even as little children, to isolate them, to humiliate them, to bully them. She saw the pictures of what happened in the Warsaw ghettos when children were shot down in the streets by Nazi soldiers. This is not something we think happened. We know it happened because there's photos of it. And you know who took the photos? The Nazis took the photos of themselves shooting children in the street for sport because they were proud of what they were doing. The little girl saw the pictures of Dachau, Bergen-Belsen, and the worst of all, Auschwitz and Birkenau, where alone 10,000 Jews a day were murdered. And when the crematoriums could not hold them, they were marched to the side of large pits that had been dug into the ground. They were shot, pushed by bulldozers over into the pits, and another group was brought to be shot and pushed over. The bodies stacked so high in the photographs, it didn't even look like people anymore, just sticks of lumber. And this little girl looked at those pictures and she stared, and she would read captions under them. And the father was hoping that somehow she was getting the message. As they left Yad Vashem, the little girl walked up to the guest book, which is at the exit of Yad Vashem. She took a pen from her father's pocket and she began to write her name and address. And underneath there was a place for comments. And she paused and then she began to write. The father looked over her shoulder because he wondered, what would she say? Maybe it would help him to understand. Did she get it? Did she know why he had brought her here? He'll never forget the words she wrote. In the comments, the little girl, 11 years old, wrote this: why didn't somebody do something? Why didn't somebody do something? How could people stand there and not do something? Why didn't somebody do something? That's all she wrote. She put the pen in her father's pocket. Didn't say another word for hours. But I stand here today and I tell you that little girl got that message. I know she did. Because today, almost every day she walks to a different podium and she speaks. That podium is at the White House. That little girl is my daughter. And she knows to stand, to pray, and to vote. And I'm asking you, will you be the somebody that'll do the something? You must. You must.